show me the man, and I will show you the crime. That phrase has a very chilling history. It is often attributed to the man who ran Joseph Stalin's secret police. And the idea behind it was simple. If the state decides that it wants you, the charge is almost beside the point. You pick the person first, and then you go looking for the crime. And if you think that that could never happen here, think again. A fundamental concept in our legal system is innocent until proven guilty. This is the inverse. And this week, the Supreme Court took a step in that direction. The case is Blanche versus Lau. Here's what the court did. If you're a lawful permanent resident, a green card holder, and you leave the country and return, a border officer can treat you not as someone coming home, but as someone seeking admission for the very first time. The lower court had ruled that an officer must have clear and convincing evidence that you had done something to forfeit your status. But this week, the Supreme Court took that protection away. Or as Justice Thomas put it, the officer needs only a reason to believe that you have violated the law. Meaning the officer no longer needs the proof up front. The government can decide you're out first and go find the evidence and justify it later. And that is a profound shift because it flips the burden. Normally, if you are treated as someone who has already been admitted, the government has to prove you should be removed, obviously, because it already admitted you once. But if you're treated as someone seeking admission at the border, the burden shifts to you. You have to prove that you belong here all over again. This does not just affect a handful of people. There are nearly 13 million lawful permanent residents in the United States. 13 million. And with one ruling, the court left every single one of them more exposed. You can see why that is particularly troubling in the hands of a president who has shown open contempt for immigrants from black and brown countries, a president who referred to certain nations as shithole countries. This is an administration that has canceled naturalization ceremonies, depending on what country you are from. And that is really what this is all about, to limit citizenship to certain kinds of people. According to Andrea Flores, a former Homeland Security official under President Obama, quote, "This is a president who wants to challenge our nation's very conception of who eventually is the future American of this country." This is what all of these things mean. And so Chief Justice John Roberts may try and say we upheld the Constitution. At the same time, we're allowing one president to redefine citizenship as we know it. And here is what that means in practice. The government can take your physical green card at the border and leave you in legal limbo while your case winds its way through the immigration system. Without having that card, getting a job, opening a bank account, or proving your legal status suddenly becomes much, much harder. All before anybody has proven you have done anything wrong. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, joined by Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, warned that the majority had handed the government, quote, a massive blank check, stripping away protections Congress deliberately wrote into immigration law. Look at the case of Mahmoud Khalil. Khalil is a lawful permanent resident. By the government's own admission, he had not been charged with or accused of or convicted of any crime when ICE agents took him from his apartment last year. The administration's first justification that his pro-Palestinian activism threatened American foreign policy, a federal judge found that likely unconstitutional. So what did the government do? It advanced a different theory, accusing him of omitting information from his green card application years earlier. His lawyers say the administration had already decided to remove him, and then they went looking for a legal basis to justify it. They came for the man first, and then they went looking for the crime. And that is why this Supreme Court ruling matters, because critics warn it gives the government even more room to act first and justify itself later. And that pattern extends well beyond immigration. Donald Trump entered his second term promising retribution against his political opponents. Since then, a weaponized Justice Department has gone after officials like New York Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the state's civil fraud case against Donald Trump, and they really had to dig. The allegations against James came not from criminal investigators, but from a federal housing official who combed through years of mortgage paperwork looking for evidence of fraud. The same fishing expedition was carried out against Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook and Adam Schiff, the senator, too. So far, those efforts have gone nowhere. The legal system has rejected Letitia James's case twice, first by a judge and then by a grand jury. They came for the person first, and then they went looking for the crime. The administration has also targeted universities and liberal nonprofit organizations, and now protesters across the country are facing sweeping criminal conspiracy charges under legal theories that civil liberties advocates say widely distort the federal criminal code. When the exercise of your First Amendment becomes a criminal conspiracy, you are officially in police state territory. My next guest, constitutional law professor Kermit Roosevelt, once put it this way: selective enforcement means that what really determines your freedom is not so much whether you try to follow the law as whether the government feels the need to prosecute you. And that is often determined by prejudice and hysteria. For more on what this ruling means, not just for immigrants, but for the rule of law, I am joined now by Kermit Roosevelt, the third professor of constitutional law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School and author of the award-winning book, The Nation That Never Was, Reconstructing America's Story. Good morning. It's good to have you.
Thanks so much for having me.
So in your book, you argue that America's real founding was during the Reconstruction and when the 14th Amendment redefined citizenship. When you see today this court allowing the government to narrow the definition of who belongs, what is it that goes through your mind?
Well, to me, this looks like a replay of the time after Reconstruction, when we had changed the Constitution, we put birthright citizenship into it, we gave individuals a whole bunch of new rights to equal treatment, particularly by the states, and then all of that was swept away. The promise of equality, the promise of birthright citizenship was really taken away from us by this wave of white supremacist terrorism that overran the integrated Reconstruction governments of the South. And the ideology that the Trump administration is pushing now is very similar to that, but it's happening on a national scale. It's not a regional scale. So now they're taking over the national government, and they're using it to constrict this idea of who belongs and who can be an American.
What hit me is that this, in particular, as it relates to immigration, the mass deportation campaign has been carried out on the streets, but they are using this redefinition of the rule of law to now go after green card rulers at the border. When people hear the rule of law, and we hear it all the time, what actually happens to it when enforcement starts to depend more on the person in power, on a Donald Trump?
Well, law becomes not a method of ordering society, but a method of extracting vengeance or pursuing the political and maybe even financial goals of the people in power. So what you're seeing is law is changing from a sort of shield that protects everyone equally to a sword that can be used selectively against the president's opponents.
Trump, he made no secret that he campaigned explicitly on the idea of retribution, and now we see the Supreme Court obviously seems aware of that political context, but it is still willing to use legal reasoning to justify these types of outcomes that align with Donald Trump's retribution campaign. Is there a point in which the legal language just is a complete and total fig leaf? Are we there?
Well, that does happen. So authoritarians, they never say, we don't care about the law, we're punishing you even though you didn't do anything wrong. They say, you're a terrorist, you're Antifa. They make up these charges. Look at the indictment of James Comey for absolutely nothing. And so one of the things that happens is you've got sort of trumped up charges and exaggerations about what people have done. The other thing that happens that this decision actually illustrates very well is that even if they can't prove anything, the government can inflict a lot of harm on you just with an indictment. Or here, for a lawful permanent resident, they can take away your green card and they can subject you to years in limbo, before you can actually get a court to say what your rights are.
I'm no legal observer, but the ones that I have seen expect the court to uphold birthright citizenship, at least many of them. But there are other legal commentators that argue that the court sometimes uses more favorable rulings to obscure, this broader erosion of rights. Do you think that what is the particular agenda, the broader agenda of the court that we are seeing now, in your opinion?
Well, it's hard to say. I think in the court is a multi-member body. So, you've got some justices who are very supportive of the Trump agenda. You've got some justices who maybe just do believe in a strong presidency and, maybe don't necessarily approve of everything that Trump is doing, but are willing to go along with that. So this court has gone a lot farther than most people expected, most constitutional law professors expected, in terms of allowing this incredible imbalance of power in our system. And we don't know how far it's going to go.